Hello everyone, and welcome to this latest video discussion as part of the RICS Tech Partner Programme. My name is Andrew Knight and I've been with RICS now for over 11 years. I sit within the standards, regulatory and thought leadership part of the organisation, and my role is to look at the impact of data and technology right across the built and natural environment. With over 110,000 qualified members working around the world, working right across the property life cycle through land, planning, development, construction, brokerage, valuation, finance, building, operation, property management, end of life. Data and technology is having a huge effect across that really wide range of activities, and indeed across a wide range of asset types, from land itself through residential, commercial, alternative assets and infrastructure. And I'm really happy today to have Howard and Carol join me from TAP, so please do join me on the call. Great to have you on this lovely cool day in the UK. So great to have you on both. It's always nice to sort of start with a bit of a backstory, I find, both in terms of kind of people's backgrounds and the firm itself. So it'd be great to have a bit of a backstory around the kind of origin story of TAP and how you've arrived at where you are today, if that isn't a hugely long question to answer.
Well, we'll try and keep it short. But I think TAP was first formulated because I was a property manager and I'd worked both in the UK and in Europe. And it was apparent that there were a number of occupiers who were uneducated in, once they signed the lease, where do they go and what do they do? So there was this whole idea that to make information available to them at no cost and easy to access, so that they could actually understand what they were doing and what they needed to do in order to help the landlord manage his asset. So it began with the very basics about information, about their leases and what are service charges and things like this. But as technology has grown, so the ability for TAP to integrate other aspects of gathering data and things like that, and has now created a platform whereby it's more data driven, and the more data that you can create automatically gives both the landlord, well, gives all parties, all stakeholders, landlords, property managers, tenants and suppliers the ability to understand better the operation of a building. I mean, we still have the information that's still there. It's still, how do I use this building? How do I get in? But there's now more data coming through which can actually anchor itself to that sort of framework. And so it gives the sort of meat to the bones. And now people can better foresee things that are happening in the building and how different operations affect different services that are being offered. So it's growing all the time. And I think the first manifestation of TAP is very different to what it is today, but you needed the first one in order to see where we are now.
Now, you mentioned you obviously had that background in property. I mean, it's always nice to kind of bring firms alive and that kind of human element. So, Carol, from your perspective, what was your route into TAP? And from that point of view, how did your paths cross in that way?
I've always been within the property industry, more in marketing and new business roles. I started getting involved in more portal driven probably about 10 years ago. So, and I really enjoyed developing different modules and exploring what clients' problems were and finding solutions to that. I'd known about TAP, I was aware of them in the marketplace. And when I decided that I wanted a new challenge, I got in touch with Howard and we had a discussion, and it came clear very early that we had a bit of a shared vision in terms of what we saw the market need for products like ourselves.
Indeed. Now, I mean, it's always nice to sort of hear about this blend of skills and backgrounds coming in. I know specifically, Howard, you're a member of the RICS, and TAP indeed is a regulated firm, and we're clearly very keen that the data and technology world doesn't exist at a total kind of distance from the real world of regulation and standards and professionalism. So how do you find that kind of status of regulation helping you with your clients? And what's your overall view of that kind of intersection between the sort of digital world and the fact that we're working in a world with real assets, with real people, where standards still need to apply?
I mean, it's a very good question, and a question which you can go into a lot of depth, because technology and data is just a small element of the RICS family. It will grow, and during our discussions with clients and potential clients, there have even been some clients who say that actually data is more valuable than the bricks and mortar that it belongs to. So will there be some time in the future where people are actually trying to value the data rather than the actual bricks and mortar and the income? Who knows? I mean, I think we're a long way off from that. But we all try and work under the same umbrella of regulation and making sure that standards and the standards that we bring are of equal value to everybody and they can actually be relied upon. And I think, we are still at the very early stages of delivering data. So, for instance, in some of our discussions with our clients, we might talk about recycling or waste or something. And you're going to have umpteen suppliers who collect your bins every day and they tell you that they recycle the waste in a particular fashion. But actually, all of that detail that comes together is in too many formats in order to even try and get a benchmark. So when somebody says, I do recycle 90%, do you recycle 90%? Because some people, they have a certain size bin. That bin is not weighed, so if it's half full or half empty, depending on how you look at it, that's considered one bin. And so the data and the information that you may get, you have to sometimes take with a pinch of salt. But we're getting there, and people are trying their very, very best to get the data that can be relied upon and not providing you with data which is too far from the mark. And I think being regulated, we can help from the inside to try and deliver that. From our point of view, it's very important that we are RICS regulated. I think we are the only portal provider who is regulated. There's a number who are the member of the tech partner group, but actually we are the only ones, and I think that helps. I mean, we have worked with clients where when they see the fact that we are RICS, they do understand that actually they can give us a problem, we can run away and we can come back with a solution, and the solution works because we understand property management, we understand property, and we understand what they're looking for. There's a number out there who perhaps wouldn't have that same inside knowledge that we have and rely upon the client to give them the detailed briefs that they then go away and build the technology.
No, and that's certainly a common theme, and we're always very keen to emphasise, even with tech partners that aren't regulated firms, that they at least have some property professionals in-house, because as you say, there's that danger that people bring a purely technical perspective to a problem in the built environment without realising and understanding those idiosyncrasies, and as you say, they almost end up relying on their clients to tell them how things work, which doesn't feel terribly sensible. Now, Carol, you mentioned in your introduction that kind of number of years you've spent looking at that kind of property portal concept. And I guess it'd be interesting to kind of really unpack almost what we mean by a property portal, how they've developed over recent years, and what do you think the trends are moving forward for this kind of concept of a portal?
Yeah, when I first started getting involved, it was very much more a property website. So it was just your standard website of information, where's my nearest dry cleaners, local deals and offers going on in and about the area. It took a long time for people to realise that actually that information is so readily available to occupiers by just going on the internet and using their mobiles. That's become more and more, whereas in those days people didn't really use their mobiles for information like that. So I guess over the years it's become more a move towards better communication with occupiers and property management to make operational decisions and share data that inform those operational decisions, rather than just local amenities and offers. And I see that developing further and further. As I mentioned, mobile is so much more important than what it was back then. People want things instantly. We're not used to having to wait anymore. You know, we immediately want a response, regardless of what the question is. So being able to interact quickly and easily on whatever device possible is so much more important these days when it comes to portals.
Indeed, and it's become a slight cliche sometimes with many of my conversations around a couple of topics that I'd be interested on your views on. One of which is, I guess, very related to the pandemic and the working from home type, or certainly mixed kind of work atmosphere, and the fact that arguably there's a kind of a change in the supply demand where now employers are having to encourage their staff back into the office, and at the same time there's this increasing understandable focus on ESG and sustainability. I mean, do you see those trends as being either mutually exclusive or in terms of prominence with asset owners? Where do you see the trends on those two incredibly important pieces?
I think, I mean, just picking up on Carol's point, where initially there was a website, a marketing website, very much in isolation. Property managers would come along, see what they could utilize out of it, and then put the building at the center, and then create the sort of facilities around it, whether it's, as Carol's pointed out, whether it is your dry cleaning, getting your keys cut, or the local offers. You know, it was really trying to put the epicenter of that building, and they relied upon people coming in every day, and that's when we all worked 5 days a week. Clearly, the pandemic came along, and people are now thinking, right, okay, I'm paying all of this money, but I need to get my workforce back in. There are some employers who are quite flexible about where they work and how often they're in the office. But I would still think the vast majority, if they had a choice, would like all of their staff in 5 days a week, whether that's 9 to 5, it's entirely up to them. Now, there's a trend where people are trying to get the workplace more of a social event. So you come in and you like to be in there. You know, we're very good at saying, you know, we'll turn the beer taps on after 6 o'clock and come in, and you can, you know, drink yourself silly or whatever you're going to do. And we're going to get local speakers in to get people to come down and listen to what they have to say. And generally speaking, that's great. And I think, you know, there is a need for that. But I do wonder if it is a need that the property owner has to provide, or whether it's a need that the companies provide. Because certainly the larger companies would say, we do all of that. You know, I know of tenants who have said, well, I've got, you know, 12 different types of coffee, I've got this, that, and the other. You know, they can roll around on roller skates if they want to during the day. It's entirely up to them. You know, but we've got all of that. We can bring all of those people in. Whereas if you go and look at statistics, the majority of companies in the UK are small, medium enterprises. So they won't have that vast bureau of facilities that they can offer. So is it right for the landlord to do it? And I think it's right for the market to explore these avenues. I mean, let's face it, Google, Microsoft, and Facebook, and Amazon have all put forward ideas, and some of those have dropped away. You know, you've seen things and no, they've dropped away because they just didn't have the take up. So it's right for the marketplace to look at that and to see whether it's going to work. If we then compare that to ESG, well, ESG is something which is very different, because that just goes to the fundamentals of property ownership. So you're now getting fund managers to look at ESG. You're now getting the banks to look at whether it's ethical to and it is right, and whether these green leases and these green loans are coming in, and whether it's so fundamentally there is this need. You then got the sort of the audience where they're all saying, yes, we need to do this thing for our planet because we need to you know, pass it on as a legacy to our children, and so on and so forth. So there is a need then to understand what's happening in a building. So if I give you an example, so where we try and bring data together, we try and bring it in such a way that there is a relationship formed between that data. So people go out and they say, we are going to promote a coffee morning. Fantastic, really good. You go and get your 25% off your coffee, but that in a way creates more waste. Unless you go in with your own cup, you go in, you buy a disposable cup. Not all these disposable cups are capable of being recycled. If you then collected the data that said, great, we had 30% more people buying coffee on that particular morning, but actually our waste went up 50%, and 45 of that 50% I couldn't actually recycle. So was that a good move to say that I should be promoting a coffee morning, which is great for my local economy, and maybe that coffee shop is one of my occupiers, absolutely fantastic. But if I've got some really fundamental ESG credentials that I need to comply with, that ain't so good. So bringing data into a sphere where you can look at it, you can analyze it, and you can see the relationships which occur very, very quickly when you make these decisions is where we're going. If that works with creating this social environment, great. All of it needs to be explored, and only the take up will tell you whether or not it is successful. I've not got the crystal ball. If I had, I would have won the lottery a long time ago, but I don't have that. But I think you need to explore those ideas, and you need to discount them if they don't work. But at the moment, it's still quite difficult to get technology in the main adopted.
Indeed. I mean, what are you hearing, Carol, in terms of, because I guess both of you are close to the clients and close to the kind of things they're asking you. What's your sense? Are they still slightly a bit confused as they come out of the pandemic, that actually they've got these competing demands and that they haven't necessarily got a stable sense of where their spaces need to go in the next 6-12 months?
I think what we're hearing from clients is the demand's too strong a word, but what the occupiers are asking for on a regular basis now, whereas perhaps they weren't previously, and that generally focuses around how much electricity are we consuming, is that going up and down, as Howard talked about the waste and the recycle, and wanting not just to show the data, but almost tell their occupiers the story. So, the fact that you've done this, yes, your energy has gone up here, but actually putting some contextualization around what that means to the whole part of ESG. So that's a theme that is coming through regardless of which client that we're talking to. It's occupiers coming to them on pretty much a daily basis wanting information, whereas perhaps before they were a bit more blasé about it, not really interested. It was just the norm. They have occupation in a building, they have their staff coming into the property to do their work, and then they go home. Now they're being challenged, property managers are being challenged more on a daily basis. So there has definitely been a shift in what occupiers expect from their occupation.
Indeed. Now, one of the things that I've always been strong about is sort of talking about data and technology rather than tech, because from my perspective, everything really starts with data. And I guess it's once again a bit of a cliche to describe the sector as being quite fragmented in many ways, given the various market participants over the property life cycle. But even when you're actually using buildings, there's various people involved, as you know better than I. How do you see what you do at TAP as sort of bringing together that fragmentation of data? Because so often people want to look at the overall picture on a building, and they discover that actually that data is either not being recorded, or if it is, it's by different people and different systems. And it's really almost an integration challenge, isn't it, to bring the data together and then turn that into meaningful information, which is ultimately what people want. They want the signal to noise ratio, to use the electrical term, to be reduced, and they just want to see the signal. What do I do? What decisions can I make based on these data from various sources?
I think there's a couple of things. I think just picking up on what Carol said. So we're seeing in some instances occupiers being more educated. So they need and they expect to have that information readily available. So to give you an example, if you were changing your bank and you decided, okay, what am I going to do? Which bank am I going to go to? Would you go to a bank that didn't have a mobile app, that you couldn't get instant details about how much you were spending and those sorts of things? And I think the same can be said with occupiers. So they're going into a building, the agents have come along and they said, do you know what, this building is absolutely incredible. It's got green all the way through it. you know, from the solar panels to the ground source heat pump, you name it, it costs virtually nothing to run. Now, in order to prove that, you're going to have to see the data. And occupiers coming in will go, yeah, great, I've been sold this fantastic, you know, thing, but I have no idea. They'll only see it in the service charge that comes through. So they have to also report internally, and more of the larger corporations are going to, you know, there's going to be a requirement for them to report on the green credentials of various buildings, and you know, what impact are they having. So we're now looking at sort of moving into that sphere. And with our system, we've given the ability for occupiers to download various bits of information that they need. Again, we think we're the only people that do this. Now, I can't say for sure, I can't put my hand on my heart, there's no one else that does this, but you know, I ask all my competitors, they're not prepared to show me. But you know, it's one of those things where you need to, through the collection of data, you need to slice it and dice it and make sure the people who need it have access to it quickly and without hassle. And I think this is the problem that a lot of people face, is that they create this technology, but because they're not property managers, they're not really looking at the stakeholders and what they need. So for example, a landlord might have 2 or 3 different managing agents. Fantastic, absolutely great. But can he see all of that detail across those? Yes, he can if he comes to town. You've got property managers, only some of them need to see certain buildings, and some of them need to have a greater visibility, or they might need different things from different areas. Again, we do that. And again, we then separate out occupiers, so they can only see what they need to see. They can't see anybody else's. And in all of that data is then put into, whether it's PowerPoint slides or different formats, where people can begin to see their impact on the building. You know, I'm not just making this up when I say that you have a lot of visitors coming in or you complain the most. I've got the data to prove it. I don't have to do anything. I can get that report off in seconds. And it's that sort of approach is the thing that I believe is going to set people apart, is understanding the makeup of the built environment and who wants what. They all want data about energy, but tenant A only wants data about the building's common parts and his own. He doesn't want to see anyone else's necessarily. And it's the same whether it's waste and so on and so forth. And then they want to be able to say, I'm going to click a button because my guy in New York has asked me for this, and it's a Sunday afternoon, and I want to be able to click a button. Now, the challenge that we face, so we've looked at our platform and we've looked at the way we've created it, and we've had to use the sort of latest technology. And as a surveyor, I'm becoming a techie as well. One of those things, but it's, you know, the second coming, and I'm now becoming techie. But I'm being taught about all the various components that go into make it up. And, you know, they're being changed all the time, they're being updated, and they give you greater facilities and flexibility, and the rendering becomes quicker and so on and so forth. So all in, you need to be able to put all of the components that you use to make the cake, and then you need to be able to slice that cake so that everybody has their bit of it and can only see. And the one that I always think has really changed the marketplace would be something like Rightmove, because in the past you scroll along all of your estate agents, and you go, right, I go that one, sign up to their list. But now you can just go on any time of day, any day of the week, and you can see what you want to see. So it's completely changed how I bought my first house, and how I can see what's on the market, and how I can see how much people are paying for the, you know, for those particular houses that have already been sold or rented. You just have this information, and I don't have to spend hours on the phone or trying to find out what's going on. It's all there. It's all there at my fingertips. And I think taking that same sort of description and putting it into a property portal for occupiers is what people want.
Now, it's interesting, Carol, you used a word earlier about education, and it strikes me that as Howard just, went through, and it wasn't an exhaustive list, there's all the different stakeholders at different levels of, dealing with different parts of an overall portfolio, all have different needs, and then arguably you get within a stakeholder group like a managing agent, there'll be different job roles who need to see different things. Similarly with, the FM team for the occupier. Do you see almost as almost a continuing educational piece here about the kind of data that's available, and that actually stakeholders are still on quite a learning curve about the data that they can access, and perhaps how that data interconnects as well? That you talked about that example, Howard, of the the coffee morning that turns into an increase in waste. These sort of correlated items are quite important as well. How do you see that playing out from an educational point of view, Carol?
Yeah, I mean, we found it quite interesting during the pandemic, because obviously we've got various different properties that we are either getting fed their energy on a regular basis, or we've got automatic integrations with their brokers. And when we sort of looked at some of the historic data to what was in the pandemic, a lot of them, there was no change in the use, but yet there was nobody in the building. And we thought that was quite an obvious thing, that you would turn your management systems certainly down, not necessarily up, but certainly down, to react to what was happening with the pandemic. But no, we were having to tell people, and we're showing you the data, but they weren't necessarily making the correlation. So we're finding that we are more and more sort of using our background and knowledge, drip feeding them to, we know that you can see the data because we're displaying it within the portal for you, but it's telling you this. And I think that TAP's role going forward will be to tell more of the story and give them more. So it's almost a case of, if they give us more data from different systems, or we can get those integrations, we can display it more, and we can tell the next chapter of that story. And again, that will all help everybody get more efficiently run buildings, smarter buildings, but more importantly, more educated people involved in those buildings.
Now, one point I wanted to actually pick up on that I think you might have both mentioned was that at one extreme, people can get very excited by the very, very smart buildings, the sort of shiny buildings in a central business district that have been installed with all the latest IoT and sensors. But as you well know, the majority of buildings in that sense are not smart. They're operated by SMEs, smaller asset managers. How are you seeing that that critical area where it's such a long tail of those kinds of assets? How are you seeing them sort of picking up on this ability to start collecting data? And is it going to be a very long journey for them, or are they really accelerating in terms of understanding they need to know more about their buildings?
In a short, it's a long journey. It's a very long journey. I'm not sure there's enough time in order to go through everything, but allow me to sort of, okay, so you can go to the statistics and you can see all of those great buildings. And I think the RICS did an article this week about the valuation of green buildings, and the fact that if you have a green building, the likelihood is, according to Knight Frank, it's going to be worth 8 to 18% more than a conventional building. So will that drive change? Probably. Will it drive sufficient change? Possibly. But when you look at some of these older buildings, so we very often we say, right, okay, look, we can demonstrate and we can display your energy data. So we can take your half-hourly data and we can put it into the system, and then we can show it on a month-by-month basis, we can show it on a daily basis, we can show it across the year, etc. And if you don't know what you should get from a typical day in the week, get what is termed like a top hat. It's very low out of hours, and then it suddenly goes up. So it's like a top hat. And you sometimes say, I've got all your half-hourly data. Go to a building manager and say, right, look at this, and they'll go, great. And they'll go, but your problem is it's flat. It's not a top hat, right? So you get this sort of blank. You get the blank, right? Well, what am I supposed to be looking at? You're supposed to be making it into a top hat, because they've had all of this data in the past, but no one's put it into a display. And there is a book out there, and there's a company out there called, I think it's called something like Information is Beautiful. And all they do is they spend all day putting information, but making it look great, telling a story. And I think the short answer is that we have a small amount of time to grab people's attention. We know that. There's been numerous studies about the internet, what it does. And the problem that we have, of course, is that people don't understand necessarily what they're looking at. So we've got to look at it. And we spend a lot of time trying to make our user experience so that it tells a story as quickly as possible. But to answer your question, is it going to be a short journey to take all of the tail and make it into this new whizzy type of building? My first question is, do I want to make it into a whizzy type building? Because if I just take something like heating, so the man sits next to me and he says, I'm really cold, I'm going to turn the air conditioning up. Woman over there says, I'm really hot, I'm going to turn it down. So you're sitting there, and you know what? The building, they've given them the flexibility. So you watch your electricity bill start to go up. It's being changed all over the place. So there needs to be an element of moderation about what we can do. Yeah, do you know what? We can. The human race can make it really, really good. It can make the fact you walk in, it can say I can turn the lights on, it can give me the temperature that I want. Great. But I'm trying to provide a system that delivers a service to the masses, not to the individual. And therefore, yeah, great. You've got some of these asset managers going, I've done this great thing. I can do this. I can go onto my app and I can turn the lights on. I can put the temperature on. I can boil the kettle even before I get there. Absolutely. Do you know what? Absolutely great. It's not what everybody wants. And actually, there comes a point where the amount of money you're spending to deliver what would be a Rolls-Royce building may only be being delivered to somebody who wants a Mondeo or something like that, or dare I say it, a Mitsubishi. So I think in those sort of senses that you need to think. I think that the marketplace is testing itself and it's going, I can do all of this because I have the technology to do all of this. But there will come a point where I don't need all of this. I only need something in between nothing and really what I'm capable of delivering. And there will be certain things that will be essential. So if you're looking about safety in a building, so when a building is constructed, you'll get a fire strategy. The fire strategy will tell you how many people you can have on every floor, etc., and where the escape routes are. But if you said to a building manager now, how many people are in your building, he might be able to find out how many people go through your speed gates, but he probably can't tell you where in the building they are. So am I overpopulating different floors? And bearing in mind, the residential sector is really concerned about what happened at Grenfell. It will spill over into the commercial sector. So you'll need to get safety data, and that data will need to be provided regardless. And we're already seeing this whole idea of the golden thread of information that you're going to have to keep from cradle to grave, how it's changed, what you've done, all of those sorts of things, and bring it all the way through. The difficulty will always come is when I then get distracted from the core business to what can I do, which is really whizzy. Right, I can book my shower. Fantastic. Do you need to book your shower? Well, who knows, but that's what some people feel that they need to do. So,
but I think, as you say, that I think the key there will be for this longer tail of assets, making sure that this kind of perfection isn't the enemy of the good, that you get sensible interventions for the kind of asset you're dealing with that deliver 80% of the kind of benefit you would get, and you don't spend a huge amount of money on that last 20%. I think that's the kind of sense of what the market should aim for, because there's no point in overfilling a regional office with lots of sensors, to be blunt, is there?
No, there isn't. We've got this thing about air quality. Now, I've managed buildings for a very long time. And I've never had a building where somebody has suffered because of the air quality that's going around. But now we're being told that we need to monitor, following this pandemic, the air quality. You know, how many parts per million is carbon dioxide? You know, is the air inside better than the air outside, and so on and so forth. And I now need to monitor it every 30 minutes, every 15 minutes, and I need to come up with this whole idea about saying this is a great standard. If we're not careful, we're going to end up with, we're going into a very sanitized environment, and yet every time we walk outside, we're facing what human nature is giving us. And I think there needs to be this compromise again, and we need to look at it in moderation. What actually do I want to achieve from all of these sensors, and how do I want my people to work? And maybe it's going back to this whole idea that I need to convince people that coming into the office is a safe environment. It's always been a safe environment. You know, if I sit next to somebody on a train who's got a cold, I'm more likely to get the cold. If I sit next to somebody in an office who's got a cold, I'm going to get their cold. It's not that they're going to breathe into the air conditioning and the air conditioning is going to take it all out and then bring it back in as sterilized air. It's not going to happen at all. So I think, again, yeah, great. Look at the air quality. And if it's bad air quality, it's not down to anything other than poor property management and built environment maintenance. But actually, we need to look at what is the sensible approach. We could be achieving a great deal if we just took the sensible route and not took the route which is the extreme of what I want to create in the future.
Indeed. Well, I suppose a final question to both of you to get your crystal balls out and look to the future. How do you see the kind of portal landscape that you work in evolving over the short to medium term?
Over to you, Carol.
Thanks. I think that we're going to see a lot more consolidation between the organisations in the industry. We've already seen bits of that happening already. Property managers are constantly looking for a differentiator. So again, is there an argument that says more of those amalgamations are going to happen so that they've got their own offering to enhance their portfolio and client base? Organisations like ourselves that maybe partner up with another organisation that focuses on one particular aspect of property management and join forces that way. Ones that offer the traditional local deals and offers, you know, focusing on a company that's got a lot more of the functionality rather than starting from scratch. It's a few of my thoughts from my crystal ball. Have you got anything different, Howard?
No, I would agree that there will be consolidation. People want to leapfrog ahead as quickly as they can. There is always this thing between, if you read the sort of VCs that invest in these places, in these companies, you go to America and you look at the figures and go, oh yeah, they just raised 10 million, 20 million, 100 million, 150 million. You just think, where do they get these figures from? And then you come to the UK and you might get 300,000, 200,000. You know, I mean, the figures are just astronomical. And you know, is it that the consolidation will come from the Americans will say, well, do you know what? I've almost got parity with the euro, I've almost got parity with the pound. It's just as cheap for me to go over there and to put my foot into that sector by buying up somebody. But as Carol says, you know, there's also people out there who, if it's right that the sector does more about the work perks, then you know maybe that they need the tools as well as the work perks, and you'll get consolidation that way. So there is a place. We are finding more and more conversations that we go into. We don't have to explain what a portal is.
Yeah,
they all know what it is now, and they all accept that there is a need for one. Take it back 5 to 10 years, and you'd say, yeah, you want a portal? No. And then they'll say, well, what's that going to do? You know, is it going to take my job away? You know, very often I've been talking to property managers and I think that a portal is actually going to replace the property manager. Well, maybe the property management world needs to reflect on what it does and how it does it. And is there a need for them to change or evolve to adapt to technology? You know, if Amazon had their way, there wouldn't be any jobs for any humans. It'd all be, you know, robotic in some form or another. And do we actually need to just reflect upon how we actually provide property management, and what parts can a portal do? Some of the heavy lifting that they actually undertake at the minute, why can't they do that? You know, and is there less then for the property management company to do, but they do it better instead of trying to stretch the tails too thin? It's all up in the air. It's all open, in the same way that we're going to need to test the water and see who comes out the other end. Well, let's see.
Indeed. Well, it's been fascinating talking to both of you, Carol, Howard, today. Thanks ever so much for your time, and I look forward to catching up again soon.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Goodbye.
Andrew.